The core is rotten, and I can behold the tide.
Hey everyone and welcome. In this video we're going to be having a look at a shouting match on LBC. Before you run away, it is quite important this, because it does highlight the absolute ignorance of a lot of people in this nation. Now this was in regards to the Edward Colston statue. Now you may be aware, you're probably more than aware actually, that Edward Colston statue in Bristol was torn down after losing a vote on getting it removed. Left-wing activists, under the banner of BLM, although most of them were white, decided to take the law into their own hands and destroy property. Now you also may be aware that the judge and jury yesterday let the 4 that were caught for doing it off scot-free. Now, I'll give you my opinion on that later on, but let's have a quick listen to what these 2 people said. Before I do, I'll introduce you to them. Now, one of the callers was called Tony, and he's from Fareham, and one of them was called Joy from Tottenham, as they rang the LBC about the Colston statue toppling and a subsequent court case which saw 4 people cleared of criminal damage. Tony then said the event did not bode well for race relations, definitely didn't, and said it was not right for people to tear down what they do not particularly like, especially considering a democratic vote was held in Bristol and only 20-something% voted to take it down. So democratically they were told no. But Joy was furious, of course she was, at Tony, and said the statue had caused misery for people of colour like her as the pair began shouting over each other during a tense debate. Now at the end of this video I'm going to play you the audio for. You tell me if Tony was shouting at each other. It was all a one-sided fee-fee fest in my honest opinion. Have a listen to this. Now, I'd like to say before we get into anything that Joy from Tottenham doesn't even live in Bristol. So why she's got to get involved and why it would cause misery for people of colour like her if she doesn't even see the statue is beyond me. And if inanimate objects cause you that much harm, you've got serious issues in your life, in my honest opinion. Now, let's have a quick listen to what they said.
About this rancid, evil, demonic statue that has been studied for over 200 years, then what that man did, I suggest your caller you have on there, research what this man did.
Well, Tony is still here and listening to you. Tony, you listened to Joy. What do you say?
It's just that's just a sort of reaction that gets people's backs up because you want to get a look at the Premier League. There are the Premiership teams are full of black players, and long may they be celebrated.
You're not really addressing Joy's point about 500 years.
Yeah, but 500 years. We're living in the 21st century. This isn't 500 years ago. These statues, and it's an insult to say that the British people don't know anything about the slave trade. It's a complete insult.
They do. You seem quite ignorant of that fact.
That's not true.
I'll prove him right
Many people
very, very
know
shortly.
Exactly what happened in the slave trade.
No, I don't think they do.
And they're ashamed of it. But it's not right for people to run around the streets tearing down statues.
Then take it down. Then take it down and stop offending and causing more misery to us black people who have...
Now let me say something at this point, everyone. Effectively, she's saying there, I don't like it, therefore it has to go. Whether the rest of the people in Bristol like it or not. Me, from Tottenham, a completely different place, have more of a say than the Bristolians. That's what she's saying. And she's calling other people ignorant. Let's have a move on, shall we? She said that British people don't know about the slave trade. What she's actually mentioning is the Atlantic slave trade only. Let me just go through slavery in general. Are we ready for this one, everyone? International slave trade. Now, it probably started with organised commerce, which began roughly in the Neolithic period, the known Stone Age, as you could call it. And it may be assumed that slaves were not far behind high-value items such as amber and salt in becoming commodities. Even among relatively simple peoples, one can trace the international slave trade. Thus, such a trade was going on among other peoples of Siberia before the arrivals of the Russians in the 16th and 17th centuries. The slaves also traded with neighbouring people captured in warfare, who were then shipped to distant points where they would be without kin and whence they would be unlikely to flee. The international slave trades that provided much of the chattel for the slave society flowed out of the great population reservoirs. 2 such reservoirs were Slavs and Iranians. So it's been going for quite some time, and this isn't just the Atlantic slave trade, as she seems to be blinkered on. This is all slavery. The international slave trades developed into elaborate networks. For example, example, in the 9th and 10th centuries, Vikings and Russian merchants took East Slavic slaves, they're white slaves by the way, into the Baltics. Then they were gathered in Denmark for further transshipment and sold to Jewish and Arabic slave traders who took them to Verdun and Lyon. There, some of the males were castrated. From these places, the slaves were sold to harems throughout Moorish Spain and Africa. In the 9th century, the Baghdad Caliphate got slaves from Western Europe via Marseille, Venice and Prague. Slavic and Turkic slaves from Eastern Europe and Central Asia via Debunked. The Mongols in the 13th century bought their first slaves from Karakorum, whence they were sold throughout Asia, and the later to the Sarai on the lower Volga, whence they were retailed through much of Eurasia. Following the breakup of the Golden Horde, the Crimean Tatars took their chattel to Kiev in Crimea, whence it was transported across the Black Sea and sold throughout the Ottoman Empire and elsewhere. Arabs developed similar supply networks out of Black Africa, across the Sahara and across the Red Sea from Ethiopia and Somalia, and out of East Africa, which supplied the Islamic world and the Indian Ocean region with human chattel. So the big takeoff from that was Arabs developed similar supply networks out of Black Africa. So they were selling themselves as slaves to Arabs who were then using them as slaves in the Arab world. And let's get on to what else happened in regards to the slave trades. Beginning about 1500, a similar process occurred along the coast of West Africa to supply the transatlantic slave trade. The slave trade that Joy is only interested in. Not the rest. Even though slavery out of Africa was going a long time before we ever got there. The Africans were captured by other Africans in raids and then transported to the coast. One may assume that the number of casualties of African slave raiding was nearly as high as that of the Crimean Tatar slave raiding. The captains, primarily adult males, were assembled on the coast by African rulers and kept in holding pens until wholesaled to European ship captains who sailed up and down the coast looking for slave cargo. As stated above, the women and children often were not sent to the coast for export but were kept by the Africans themselves as slaves, often for incorporation into their lineages. Sex slaves. African rulers who did not allow the Europeans to move inland often conducted their wholesale business on the coast, such as at Ouida in Dahomey, now Benin. Because of the disease climate, the Europeans were also reluctant, even unable, to move inland until the mid-19th century. But African rulers did everything they could to encourage the European sea captains to come to their port and buy people. So who's the ignorant one here, everyone? Anyone? Now you got to also remember that abolition of slavery was brought into effect by Britain, by us, by the people that lived here. If it wasn't for us, it would still be going, like it is in some countries like Libya, etc. This is cherry-picking history to fit your narrative, and I think it's pretty low and disgraceful. So obviously, Joy's wrong. The British people do know about the slave trade. We just choose not to talk about it 24 hours a day, don't we, people? Let me know what you think, though. I'd like to know your opinion on this one. To dredge up our old sins without dredging up their own sins is one-sided, to say the very least, and should be completely ignored. But what say you? If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon, share it out. Stay sane, I'll see you on the next one.